The rain had been falling for hours, the kind that drummed against tin roofs like impatient fingers tapping a table. In the dim yellow glow of the single streetlight, Nia walked slowly, clutching her faded brown leather bag close to her chest. Her sandals slapped against the muddy road, leaving behind imprints that quickly filled with water. She had no umbrella, only the oversized shawl wrapped around her shoulders to shield her from the cold evening air of Banyari, a small rural town in the eastern hills of Sierra Leone. Nia had never walked these streets before. She was from the capital, Freetown, a place of noise, ambition, and constant movement. But tonight, she was far from the busy roundabouts and tall glass buildings. She was here in this quiet town for one reason: escape. Her phone had died 2 hours earlier, somewhere between the lorry park and the winding bush road that had brought her here. And even if it hadn't, there was no one she felt she could call. Not anymore. She turned a corner and saw it, a house, large but weather-worn, with white paint peeling off its walls like old paper. The roof was corrugated zinc, but newer than the rest of the building. Light seeped through the cracks in the curtains of one window, and smoke curled lazily from a chimney at the back. Something about the place made her stop. She stood in the rain, staring at it, feeling an odd pull in her chest. It wasn't beautiful, not in the way houses in the city were, but it had a warmth that whispered to her like a memory she couldn't quite place. She took a deep breath and stepped through the small gate, which creaked loudly as she pushed it open. The yard smelled faintly of wet earth and wood smoke. A dog barked somewhere inside, deep and suspicious. Before she could change her mind, she knocked on the heavy wooden door. It took a moment, but eventually, it opened just wide enough for a man to peer out. His eyes were sharp, his skin the deep brown of someone who had worked long under the African sun, and his face held a weariness that spoke of many untold stories. Yes? His voice was cautious, as if the question carried more weight than it should. Nia hesitated, shivering slightly. Please, I'm sorry to disturb you, but can I stay here tonight? The man didn't answer immediately. He studied her, her damp shawl, the mud on her sandals, the way she clutched her bag like a lifeline. Then his gaze softened, almost imperceptibly, and he stepped aside. You'd better come in before the rain swallows you. She stepped inside, feeling the warmth of the small living room wrap around her. It smelled faintly of burning wood and something else, something familiar she couldn't name. The man closed the door behind her and walked past without another word, disappearing into what she assumed was the kitchen. She stood awkwardly, dripping on the woven mat at her feet, taking in the room. The walls were lined with old framed photographs, black and white images of people in traditional dress, younger men and women smiling in a way that made the past look gentler than it probably was. On the table was a carved wooden bowl filled with oranges. Beside it sat a small clay lamp, its flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the wall. When the man returned, he carried a mug of hot tea. Drink, he said simply, handing it to her. Thank you. She wrapped her hands around it, feeling the heat seep into her fingers. They sat in silence for a while, the rain filling the space between them. Finally, she spoke. I'll leave in the morning. I had to get away from the city. From everything. The man's eyes flickered with something she didn't understand, but he only nodded. The city has a way of chewing people up and spitting them out. She looked at him more closely now. He couldn't have been more than 40, but there was an oldness about him, like someone who had lived too many lives already. His hands, resting on his knees, were strong but scarred. Do you live here alone? She asked. Yes. His tone was final, but after a moment he added, for now. She wanted to ask what that meant, but instead she sipped her tea. As the minutes passed, she noticed his eyes drifting toward her face now and then, not in the way of a man sizing up a stranger, but in the way of someone studying a memory. Finally, he asked, what's your name? Nia. He smiled faintly, as if tasting the name on his tongue. Beautiful name. It means purpose. Yes, she said softly. My mother chose it. He leaned back in his chair, watching the flames in the small fireplace. Purpose is a hard thing to find. Harder still to keep. Outside, the rain had lessened to a drizzle. Inside, the crackling fire cast a golden glow across the room. Nia felt the tension in her shoulders ease for the first time in days. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that she had just stepped into the very house where the man had once built his entire life, and lost it all. His name was Kofi. And long before Nia ever set foot on this muddy road, Kofi had called this place home. Every wall, every photograph, every scar on the floorboards carried pieces of his past, a past that had been ripped away in a single night of betrayal. And as he looked at Nia now, soaked and shivering in his living room, he couldn't help but wonder if fate had just brought back a ghost he'd been running from for years. Nia woke to the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere nearby. The rain had stopped, leaving the world fresh and damp. Soft daylight spilled through the thin curtains of the small guest room she had been given. It smelled faintly of palm oil soap and something older, like the scent of wood that had seen many seasons. For a moment, she lay still, trying to remember where she was. Then it all came back, the rain, the long walk, the stranger who had let her in. She sat up and saw her bag on the chair, untouched. A folded cloth lay beside it, a clean wrapper, bright with red and gold patterns. She wrapped it around herself before stepping into the corridor. The floor creaked under her bare feet. She followed the sound of voices, low, deliberate, coming from the kitchen. Kofi was seated at the small wooden table, peeling boiled cassava. Across from him sat an elderly woman with skin like wrinkled leather and eyes sharp enough to slice through lies. "This is her?" the old woman asked, her gaze flicking to Nia as she entered. "Yes, Ma," Kofi replied simply. The woman studied Nia for a long moment, then nodded toward a stool. "Sit. Eat. The road is not kind to the hungry." Nia obeyed, still unsure who this woman was. She accepted a plate of cassava and pepper soup, the steam rising in fragrant curls. "Thank you," she murmured. The old woman smiled faintly. "You are far from home." Nia hesitated. "Yes. From Freetown." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, as though she could read more in that single word than Nia had said aloud. When she left the table to tend the fire outside, Nia turned to Kofi. "Is she your mother?" He shook his head. "No. She's the caretaker of this place, in a way." "In a way?" He didn't elaborate, and something in his expression told her it was not a topic for now. They ate in silence for a while before Kofi spoke again. "Why did you run from the city?" Nia froze. She had not told him she was running, only that she needed to get away. "How do you know I was running?" He leaned back, his eyes steady. "People who are traveling rest. People who are running arrive in the rain, unannounced, clutching their bags like they hold their whole life." She looked down at her food. It's complicated." "Complicated things," he said, "are just simple things with too much shame to speak their names." His words stung because they were true. She could feel them digging into the part of her she had been trying to bury since yesterday morning. Finally, she whispered, "I was engaged. Yesterday, I found out he has been with another woman for months. And that woman is pregnant." Kofi said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He pushed his plate aside and looked out the window toward the hills. "My mother told me not to marry him," Nia went on, her voice trembling. "But I didn't listen. I thought love would fix everything." "Love doesn't fix everything," Kofi said quietly. "It only makes the break hurt more when it comes." There was a heaviness in his tone that made her glance at him. "You sound like you know." He gave a humorless smile. "I know." The air between them grew still, filled only by the faint sound of the caretaker's voice humming outside. Later, when Nia stepped into the yard, she saw the land around the house for the first time. It stretched wide, red earth dotted with mango and guava trees, a small stream glinting in the distance. A few goats wandered near the fence. "This place is beautiful," she said when Kofi joined her. "It used to be more than beautiful," he replied. "It used to be mine." She turned to him, startled. "Yours?" He nodded slowly. "I built this house. Every brick, every wall. I planted those mango trees when they were no higher than my knee. Nia glanced back at the caretaker's small figure in the distance. Then, why aren't you living here? Because someone decided it should no longer belong to me, he said, his voice flat but edged with something sharp, anger, pain, maybe both. A long time ago, before you ever thought of coming here. Nia wanted to ask more, but the look in his eyes warned her off. That night, as the crickets sang and the air cooled, Kofi sat outside, watching the stars. Nia joined him quietly. Tell me, she said softly, what happened here? He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I came back from the city 12 years ago with dreams bigger than my pockets. I worked harder than anyone thought possible. I built this house for my wife, Amina, the woman I thought was the answer to every prayer. We lived here 5 years. Then one night, I came home to find it empty. She had taken everything, money, documents, even the furniture. She sold the land to her cousin while I was away. By the time I could fight, it was already gone. Nia's heart twisted. And the caretaker? She is Amina's aunt. She let me stay in a small hut by the stream for a while. Then I left. Couldn't bear to watch strangers live in my home. But after the cousin died last year, the house sat empty. I came back, not as the owner, but as someone allowed to stay for a while. It's a strange thing, to live inside your own ghost. The silence after that was heavy. Nia could feel his pain, deep and raw, even after all these years. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. Two wounded strangers sat there under the African night, both carrying losses the other could not yet fully see. Neither of them knew that their meeting would stir up the embers of old betrayals and set in motion a path toward truths neither was ready to face. The following days in Banyari moved slower than Nia was used to. In Freetown, every hour was swallowed by the rush of traffic, the noise of markets, and the hum of ambition. Here, the mornings began with the smell of wood smoke and the sound of women pounding cassava in wooden mortars. Afternoons stretched long, broken only by the call to prayer from the small mosque by the stream. Nights were cool and filled with the steady chorus of crickets and frogs. For the first time in months, Nia felt her chest loosen. Her thoughts didn't race as much. The ache in her heart hadn't gone, but it no longer screamed. Kofi didn't talk much, but when he did, his words stayed with her. He moved through the house like a man still learning how to belong in his own skin, his eyes scanning each room as if expecting something to be missing. Sometimes, she caught him looking at her the way one might look at a half-forgotten song, recognizing pieces of it, but unable to recall the whole tune. One evening, the caretaker's niece, Mariama, came by to deliver palm wine. She was a lively woman in her 30s, with laughter that rang like a market bell. She and Kofi greeted each other with the easy warmth of old neighbors. "Ah, so you found yourself a guest," Mariama teased, glancing at Nia. "And a beautiful one at that. Banyari will start talking if you're not careful." Nia smiled politely, but inside, she felt an unfamiliar twist. It wasn't jealousy, exactly, but there was something in the way Mariama and Kofi laughed together that made her feel suddenly separate. After Mariama left, Nia found herself asking, was she a friend from before? Kofi raised an eyebrow. "Mariama. She grew up around here. We were children together. Nothing more." Nia nodded, but her mind kept circling the sound of their laughter. The next day, Nia went into the small town market for the first time. The narrow lanes bustled with life, women calling out prices for dried fish, young boys chasing each other with roasted groundnuts, the smell of smoked tilapia and ripe mangoes hanging thick in the air. She bought a scarf in deep blue, thinking it would match the color of the evening sky. As she was paying, an older woman nearby stared at her for a long moment before approaching. "You're staying in Kofi's house," the woman said, not a question, but a statement. Nia blinked. "I'm staying at the house, yes." The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful with that man. He carries a shadow. He's not the same since what happened." Before Nia could ask what she meant, the woman walked away, her market basket swinging at her side. That night, curiosity finally got the better of her. As Kofi prepared the evening fire, she said quietly, "Someone at the market, they said you carry a shadow. That you've changed since what happened." "What did they mean?" He didn't look at her. "They mean I am not the man they remember. And maybe I'm not. But tell me, does anyone stay the same after losing everything?" There was no bitterness in his voice, only an ache too old to be loud. "Still," Nia pressed gently. "Do you still love her?" "Amina?" Kofi's hands froze over the firewood. He stared into the flames for a long moment before answering. "Love is not the word. Not anymore. What I feel now is something colder." She understood without him saying it. Betrayal doesn't just wound, it corrodes. Over the next week, Nia began to see fragments of the man he had been. One afternoon, he helped repair the fence for a neighbor's goat pen, laughing with the children as they tried to help. Another time, she caught him humming an old highlife tune while shelling groundnuts. These small moments made her wonder if beneath the scars, there was still a man who could love again. But the past has a way of finding its way home. It was a Sunday afternoon when Mariama returned, not alone this time. With her was a tall man in a crisp white shirt and polished shoes, a city man, by his manner and scent of imported cologne. "Kofi," Mariama said, "this is Idris. He's from Freetown. He's looking to buy land here." Kofi's jaw tightened, but he shook the man's hand. "Welcome." When Mariama and Idris left an hour later, Nia noticed the way Kofi's mood had shifted. He was quieter, his gaze distant. That night, as the fire burned low, he finally said, "Idris works for Amina's brother." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. "She's back?" Nia asked. He nodded slowly. "And if her family is sniffing around here again, it means she wants something. She always wants something." Nia thought of the warning from the market woman and felt a shiver crawl up her spine. The days that followed were uneasy. Kofi started spending more time in the village, speaking with old friends and keeping his ear open for news. One evening, he came back with a look in his eyes that made Nia's chest tighten. "She's coming here," he said simply. Nia's stomach dropped. "Here? To the house?" "Yes. And I don't know why yet. But whatever it is, it won't be good." That night, sleep refused to come. Nia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of the stream. She thought about Kofi's story, about her own heartbreak, and about the strange twist of fate that had brought her here, into the home that was once his, on the eve of the return of the woman who had destroyed it. What she didn't know was that Amina's arrival would not only reopen Kofi's old wounds but would also force Nia to confront a truth she had been avoiding since she left Freetown, one that would change both of their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The next morning, the air was thick with the smell of rain even though the sky was still clear. The caretaker moved about the yard with an unusual restlessness, sweeping the same patch of ground twice. Kofi sat on the veranda, sharpening his old cutlass in slow, deliberate strokes. Nia tried to keep herself busy in the kitchen, but her ears strained for the sound of approaching footsteps. By late afternoon, they came, the crunch of tires on gravel, the low rumble of an engine. A silver SUV rolled through the gate, gleaming like it had never touched a dusty road in its life. The door opened, and Amina stepped out. She was beautiful in the way of women who know they are watched, tall, dressed in a flowing cream gown, gold earrings catching the light. But there was something cold in her beauty, something that felt like the shine of polished steel. Her gaze swept over the house, pausing on Nia briefly before landing on Kofi. She smiled, slow and practiced. "Kofi," she said, as if tasting the name. "It's been a long time." Kofi's jaw tightened. "Not long enough." Amina walked closer, her heels clicking against the stone path. "I heard you were back here. I thought, maybe it was time we talked." "There's nothing to talk about." "Oh, there's always something," she said, glancing toward the caretaker, who had stopped sweeping to watch. "I've come to make an offer. I want to buy this house back." Kofi laughed, short, sharp, humorless. "You can't buy back what was never yours." Amina tilted her head. Everything has a price. Nia watched the exchange, her chest tight. She could feel the tension crackling like a dry log ready to catch fire. Kofi stood, stepping down from the veranda. I built this house. You sold it out from under me. You left me with nothing, Amina. Nothing. And now you come here in your city clothes, thinking you can erase the past with money? Amina's smile faltered for the first time. It's just business. No, Kofi said, his voice low. It was never just business. It was my life. The caretaker moved between them, her voice firm. You two will not fight in front of my yard. If you want to shout, go to the road. Amina glanced at Nia again, her eyes narrowing slightly. And who is she? Nia felt the weight of the gaze but lifted her chin. A guest. Someone who actually respects this place. Something flickered in Amina's eyes, recognition, maybe annoyance. But she only said, think about my offer, Kofi. I'll be back. She left as quickly as she came, the SUV vanishing down the road in a cloud of dust. That evening, Kofi sat on the steps, his cutlass lying forgotten beside him. Nia joined him, sitting close enough that their shoulders brushed. She'll be back, Nia said quietly. Yes. What will you do? Kofi stared at the mango trees swaying in the wind. I don't know. Part of me wants to take her money, disappear, start over somewhere far away. But another part wants her to see that she couldn't break me. That I'm still here. Nia was silent for a moment. Maybe it's not about her anymore. Maybe it's about what you want for yourself. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. And what do you want, Nia? Why are you really here? Her throat tightened. She had been running from the answer for days. Because I didn't know where else to go. Because I didn't want to be alone. And maybe, because I feel something here. Something I can't explain. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy but warm. In the days that followed, Amina returned twice more, each time with a higher offer. Each time, Kofi refused. The villagers began to talk, some saying he was a fool to refuse so much money, others admiring his stubbornness. One night, after Amina's third visit, Nia found Kofi outside, staring at the stars. I'm not selling, he said without turning. Good, she replied softly. But I'm also not staying here forever, he added. This house, it's full of memories I can't keep living with. I think I want to build again. Somewhere new. Nia felt something stir in her chest, a mix of hope and fear. And where will you go? He finally looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. Wherever the road leads. Maybe the city. Maybe somewhere quieter. Maybe, somewhere with someone who wants to build a life with me, brick by brick. Her breath caught at the unspoken meaning in his words. 2 weeks later, they left Banyari together. The caretaker stood at the gate, blessing their journey with a prayer in Temni. The mango trees swayed in the wind, their roots deep but their branches reaching far. As they walked down the red road toward the waiting lorry, Nia glanced back at the house one last time. It stood silent, holding the stories of love and betrayal, loss and resilience. Kofi took her hand. You know, he said, when you knocked on my door that night, I thought you were just another traveler. But maybe you were the reason I stayed long enough to remember who I was. Nia smiled through the sting of tears. And maybe you were the reason I stopped running. The road stretched ahead, dusty and open, the kind of road that carried both endings and beginnings. And together, they walked into it, not as strangers anymore, but as two people who had found, in each other, the courage to start again.